So our third talk of the day, I'm going to welcome Martin Allison to the stage. He's the director of Rosedale Advisory. He's also on the director of council?
Chairman of the
advisory board, sorry, for Bree, who we heard from just before lunch. So he's going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurial resilience and thriving through challenge. So Martin, welcome.
Thank you. Yes. A very good afternoon, one and all. I'm going to adopt the Dave Allen pause, but without the whiskey. So for those, so I hope I've tried to create this as a little bit of a balance between sort of useful academic information, but also in a sort of storytelling style. So I hope you enjoy it. I've got my notes here, which I'm going to be using. We will be providing all copies of everything, so enjoy. And it's a very poignant moment for myself, actually, because 35 years ago, next week, I graduated with an MBA. Can't believe 35 years. Where's that time? And in that time, I've seen property and stock market crashes, financial system meltdowns, wars, pandemics, all of which made me realize that we all have to handle challenges, change, and setbacks. And we do. Resilience really is an important subject. It's not my expertise, but I have thoroughly enjoyed doing a little bit of research and reflecting on some of the people I've been very privileged to have met or worked with over the years. But over this 35 years, I've been a banker, so you can boo now or don't invite me to parties any longer. I've been chair of an Olympic national sporting governing body, various charitable organisations. I've actually headed up the University Business and Law School and had several investments and private enterprises in both turnaround and in growth stories. So my intention today is to reflect on people that I have admired, learned from and worked with, and bring to life this concept of entrepreneurial resilience. And I hope at the end of the session, you'll all have a powerful metaphor and some mnemonics to remember the factors and the components of resilience and how you might think about developing or strengthening your own resilience. So hopefully this now works. It's not working. How do I point? Rachel, it's not. Click on. Okay, go on. Yeah. In order to get, I'll just keep it. Yeah. Oh, there we are.
There we go. We just had to.
Right. Okay. So in order to get there, we'll consider why entrepreneurs face supplementary challenges on their journeys and therefore need higher resilience levels than most people. We all develop personal resilience, but entrepreneurs, I'd suggest, have a little bit more melodrama, almost an operatic approach to resilience. And so understanding the different traits or components will be, hopefully informative. We also intend to consider why does entrepreneurial resilience matter? And what are the benefits of having these individuals being able to roll with the knocks? Which shall then set a scene for us to understand some of the myths and truths about the subject. And then we'll consider two academic models, one from child development and another on grit, which will help us to find common characteristics that we can learn from in creating our own models and our own mnemonics based on the observations from several inspiring, resilient entrepreneurs I've observed and worked with. So bouncing back is often mentioned when the term resilience is talked about. And so I'm tabling the metaphor of a bouncing ball, which I'm sure and I hope you're all going to enjoy. More of this to be revealed soon. Finally, and in true operatic style, we'll reach our crescendo with ideas and practical actions that you can consider to build your own resilience, whether as an entrepreneur or not. And as for an encore, I'm going to suggest a resilience mnemonic to remember the key lessons so you can win in your own resilience efforts. So before moving on, I just wanted to confirm you will receive the slides. Some of them are quite busy, but I've provided them as reference sources, as material that you can revisit. So I promise to pick out the key messages, so don't worry if I skim through some of the items. So we've heard earlier about personal resilience, very powerfully, absolutely impressive. I simply wish to highlight the American Psychological Association's definition, which is adapting well in the face of adversity in various forms. But entrepreneurial resilience, I believe, is personal resilience amplified by organizational resilience required for the business that the entrepreneur is associated, but also multiplied by the additional personal resilience factors that entrepreneurs face, being the founder, being a leader of a team, and quite often being a funder of the enterprise. So emotional resilience is defined as the capacity of entrepreneurs to adapt, to recover, and to grow stronger when faced with challenges, setbacks, and uncertainty for them and their organization. At this point, I want to highlight some key ideas and takeaways for you to wrestle with as we go and see some of the examples. First thing is it's a skill resilience that can be learned, developed, and cultivated with deliberate practice and mindset shifts. And we heard some great stories this morning. Resilience is shaped by beliefs, by experiences, and by the environmental feedback. It's about transforming in tough times into opportunity. It's transforming tough times into opportunity, and not just bouncing back, but bouncing onward, bouncing forward, what I call bounceability. I had the privilege of working with some Olympians on this, and the motto was faster, higher, stronger together. And actually, I noticed three things to be cultivated, which was mindset development, strategic adaptability, and strong support systems. And I'll come back to those three areas. So here, we simply compare and contrast personal and entrepreneurial resilience. I'm not going to go through each of them, but we look at the definitions and the context, but also traits. And so I've used TRAITS to look at the factors of tolerance, resourcefulness, adaptability, being informed, being thoughtful, and being supported. And for each trait, I look and say, okay, what does that mean for personal life journey, but also what does it mean for entrepreneurs? And there's some interesting differences, which I just want to pick out one or two things. The first one is the tolerance trait, and it's really interesting. Entrepreneurs have to, at times, have a risk tolerance higher than many of us in personal. They have to understand that. But at the same time, they become very intolerant of the status quo, systems, products, services that they don't like, and they reinvent and innovate and bring new ones in. So that's an interesting sort of quandary, dilemma in a way. But in terms also of being informative and being thoughtful, they need to reflect and they need to understand planning, environmental scanning techniques, risk reviews, and these are extra skills that they need to adapt and learn and become comfortable with. So hopefully the examples will bring these to life. And these traits are developed and with the help and the support of many stakeholders on what we call the entrepreneurial journey, which is very iterative. Simple descriptions of an entrepreneur's journey. I don't know why that's yeah. Simple descriptions of an entrepreneur's journey fail to reflect the reality of what entrepreneurs actually recollect. They can understand excitement phase, challenge phase, adoption and growth, but the timescales vary greatly and it keeps being revisited, and truly great entrepreneurs bounce back. And what you tend to see is quite often academic models, studies show nice smooth graphs with key decision points, moments of inflection. The truth is the ups and downs are much more savage and much more like the graph on the right, where we've got lots of troughs, lots of ups, downs, and a gradual progression. So why does it matter? Well, with a strong competence in entrepreneurial resilience, then the probability or a chance of survival improves, and businesses can recover from setbacks. We learn from challenges and failures, and it can also help with experimentation and innovation. Resilient entrepreneurs engage and listen to their teams, and they build trust and confidence, and they create a more productive, positive culture, so happier and higher performing teams result. Their leadership maintains a focus on long-term goals and enables decision making, provides the context. And for organizations to survive, then just like Darwin's evolution of species, it's the most adaptable that are the winners. They keep evolving, they keep rolling despite the challenges. So it is fair to say we live in turbulent times, and resilient entrepreneurs are able to adapt and cope just with everything that's going on. They can plan realistically, they can look ahead on the issues that are arising. They have positive self-talking, and they can communicate well with others. They have emotional control, and they can control their feelings and impulses to react to circumstances. They absorb the hard knocks and reframe issues and opportunities, and they constantly look to learn and to develop. And this led me to start to wonder how some people are more resilient, and can it be learned? So Dr. Ken Ginsberg's research into resilience specifically looked at child development, and it's very informative, as it was his findings on resilience that it can be developed. He created a model of the 7 C's of resilience, which are confidence, correction, character, coping, contribution, control, and competence. And it's widely used by parents and care workers to support children's resilience development. And interestingly, it focused on 3 key areas: encouraging independence of thoughts and choices, building strong relationships, and modeling and practicing positive behaviors. His observation that resilience is a skill that can be learned and developed over time, rather than a trait that you're just naturally born with, helped me to consider the other myths and truths about this subject. There's no such thing as this super breed of resilient people out there who are totally immune to stress and negativity. In truth, everyone's experiences these things per se, but resilient people choose to respond positively based on a purpose and a meaning to life. Resilient people are not inherently tougher or more independent and not needing the help of other people. In truth, they are resourceful and surround themselves with family, friends, and professional advisors. And finally, a myth that adversity makes us stronger needs clarifying, such that the process of struggling, of adaptation, learning, and persevering, that's what actually makes us stronger. So to quote Carlos Wallace, your scars are the roadmap to your resilience. Here's the first of several people I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with, primarily as their banker in the 1990s, early noughties. Lord Carrambillamoria was Chancellor of the University of Birmingham for 10 years, just until fairly recently. And he also originally studied law at Cambridge. And it was while he was there, when he was going for meals with his friends in Curry's, he was dissatisfied with the drinks that were served. He thought that the lagers were too fizzy And whilst he enjoyed English ales, he felt that they were too heavy and they didn't complement the food. So he decided to create his own solution, Cobra beer. I'm sure most of you will have heard of it, if not tried it. But he grew Cobra beer really fast, and he received many awards, accolades during the 90s. And despite lots of setbacks, lots of challenges, he had the grit and the guts to stick at it. He is regarded as a bit of an authority on resilience, and he's made various YouTube videos, and there's a link in the slide if when you do get them, if you want to have a look. So he saw any challenges that he faced as a simple problem, solution, action, a simple process, which he adopted with a really disciplined effort. However, post the financial crisis in 2008, and as a result of his fast expansion and high debt levels, he found it really hard to refinance or restructure. And the company was put into administration in 2009 with many creditors, hundreds, and 72 million of debts. Instead of giving up, he then led a pre-pack and partnered with Molson Coors, the major brewer, and he also offered personally to repay all of the creditors from his own personal profits going forward. And some years later, he did repay back 99% of that 72 million. Very impressive, with great discipline and great effort. He rebuilt the capabilities and the Cobra brand, and he stayed true to his original values and strategic purpose. But his emphasis on guts and grit caused me to look at other university research and a book called Grit by Dr. Angela Duckworth, who has studied at Oxford, Harvard, and Pennsylvania. And she defined grit as a combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And she highlighted individuals who not only worked hard, but stayed committed despite slow progress or setbacks. And on the left, she identified 7 components of grit, which are very easily mapped and linked across to resilience factors. Again, homing in on the 3 things: mindset development, strategic adaptability, and support systems for coping and self-management. The grit American description reminded me of another entrepreneur who, with her brother Bobby, started Coffee Republic in 1995. It's now hard to think about a time when coffee shops were scarce on our high streets. But when Saha and Bobby returned from the States, they missed their American-style coffee and bar experiences, and they felt there was an opportunity to replicate them in London. With a passion and purposeful vision, they set off with great personal effort and market researched the streets of London and tracked footfall. They created a plan, and despite being rejected 19 times by various banks, she eventually found a NatWest bank manager who was willing to lend them some money under a government-guaranteed small firm loan scheme. The first site they identified was in the West End, and so had a really high rent. And what came with that was a very high risk profile. But because of their approach to risk tolerance, it was such that they took it. And they persevered. And they launched, and they grew the brand, and they had many outlets when the sector began to consolidate into the giant names we'll all recognize now. And when she exited very successfully, she recorded a book, wrote a book about her experiences. I would really recommend this book if you're interested in this subject. Saha talks about anyone can do it, and it's the lessons up, down, round and round. And she talks about figuring out things on the go. You don't have all the answers, but you'll work it out and you'll keep moving forward. So having met several of these entrepreneurs I mentioned today, I was beginning to notice this operatic characteristics. Indeed, several of these people have now gone on to the public speaking circuit. And this caused me to think about a little mnemonic, and I'll give the game away. Operas. So the resilience components that I saw as being very common are optimism, having a purpose, a clear why that drives this passion and persistence, having an emotional strength, staying calm under pressure. They used to call it in rugby circles with Clyde Woodward, teacup, thinking under pressure. Resourcefulness. We talk in business schools about bootstrapping, doing more with less. And that's not just money, but time and effort too. And we talk about adapting, pivoting is the recent jargon, pivoting with our strategy as markets change. But of course, having the right support systems. So this mnemonic for the rest of the presentation will be used to hopefully bring to life some of the entrepreneurial cases, and we'll develop some of the thoughts and ideas and hopefully give you some actions to consider. So first, I'd like to stick with the opera theme. And I remember going to a wonderful evening at Cirque du Soleil, the combination of circus and opera. And it was in the days when bankers would spend time with customers. And I had the privilege of meeting this lady, Chrissy Rucker of the White Company. Chrissy has done a brilliant YouTube interview with Trini, the TV personality. Again, have a look at it. It's well worth it. And she highlights her journey and lessons on resilience. She started the White Company in 1994 with only £6,000. And this concept of having quality design products at an affordable price, she stuck with. She reflected on the fact that when mistakes happened, then once you see them, rectify them and learn from them. She also highlighted the importance of having a long-term vision, of having a purpose and quality plans. And she believes that this encourages focus and decision-making and accountability within her teams. And interestingly, she also highlighted the importance of staying optimistic when hardship causes change. She talks about actually how this can be exciting and quite often needed. This ability to adapt or bounce started me to think about the metaphor of the bouncing ball. So I hope you find this bit fun. Did do physics A level, but I would not profess to be an expert. So we're going to talk about the Newton's third law of motion. And on the screen you'll see, so we have a ball, and as it's held here, it has gravitational pull factors, energy within the ball, and gravitation is pulling it. And as it turns into motion, as it drops, you're going to have some air resistance, but the gravity, it will speed up. And when it hits the ground, it distorts, the shape distorts a little. And then with Newton's third law, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The surface pushes it back and it reconverts this elastic potential energy into kinetic motion energy. So if there are any physics people in the room and I've got that wrong, apologies, but stick with it. This is the metaphor. Okay, so not all balls are the same, and I have a selection here. Where upon impact, you will see that when you drop it, it doesn't quite bounce up to the same level as it started. That's because energy is lost on the bounce. It's lost as noise, which hopefully you could hear. It's lost as heat. It's lost as material distortion and other factors. So energy is lost. And the metaphor here is when things happen to us as personal or as human beings, what's the same and what can we do? Now, if we look at different balls, this is the stress ball. Occasionally useful. Doesn't bounce very much. If we look at the tennis ball, Look at a cricket ball, squash ball, or look at a golf ball. All these balls are for different sports, but they all have different bounceability. And that's just like us as human beings, isn't it? We all start with beliefs and experiences, and we all have different inbuilt levels of resilience and bounceability. So that's my metaphor. That's what I'm hoping we can develop and see how some of the resilient entrepreneurs have demonstrated some of these skills. So couldn't really not, or sorry, I should say. However, we need to think about the circumstances and the environment and the different types of things that can happen. And I'm going to just explore. This is a racket with strings. This is the tennis ball. The tennis ball has almost like fur around the belt, and the racket has strings. And however you approach the swing in tennis, you can create spin, top spin, back spin. The way, the angle that you do it, you are directing the strategy of the company. You can change the angle. You can change the direction of your company. And these are all things that I've played around with to think about, well, actually, what are the lessons in the metaphor? How can we build and strengthen? So a squash ball, if we hit a squash ball against the wall several times, it warms up. And actually, they become much more bounceable. A warmer squash ball bounces much more. Why is that? Because inside the air molecules are working a little bit harder, pushing out, and the distortion is less, and the bounce is greater. What does that mean for us? How can we build? How can we heat ourselves up, create more energy to make us more resilient? So hopefully that metaphor will make you think. And one last thing. Life is never always easy. And we live in what we call a VUCA environment. A volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I'm sure we all heard it, talk about it, etc. Now, you bounce the ball, up it comes. But actually, the environment's a bit choppy, like a choppy sea or an egg box. And so if you drop the ball on, what happens? Well, the result is unpredictable. It can bounce, and you believe all three went in. That's highly unusual. The ideal is it goes one way, another way, or not in. There we are, the others didn't. But unbelievable. So I didn't know I had some skills. So that's the analogies that I sort of want to play around with, and hopefully you'll find. Now, Gerald Ratner. Have most people heard of Gerald Ratner, the jewelry empire? Yeah. I'm sure. So I don't know whether I should have put that up, but if Luke got away with it this morning, I'm all right. It's the RAP. So in 1991, Gerald Ratner gave this an answer to a question in a stock market presentation, and he talked about, or they were asking him, why were his products, how could he buy them so cheap, and how could he make such profit? He replied by saying the total CRAP. And the market reacted very badly and literally was 500 million down within a week, the stock market valuation. He was asked to resign. And as he says, he then faced public humiliation for 7 years. He went to bed for 7 years, hid his face. However, he did bounce. He saw what was going on online, and he persuaded some friends to set up a new business, Gerard Online, a jewelry business, which lasted for over a decade before that also ceased to trade. He invested in health clubs, and he also became an author, a public speaker, and a mentor. And he shared his lessons of failure, strategy, and resilience. And he was able to reframe that failure with his sense of humour, with his positive attitude and his self-awareness. And he talks quite openly that failure isn't final. It's a chance to reinvest, it's a chance to evolve, and it's a chance to restore reputational credibility. And would you believe, as we sit today, he is actually in talks to buy back H. Samuel and Ernest Jones at the age of 75, his original business from the early 90s. Quite incredible demonstration of resilience. So the three analogies I'm going to use are very simple. We've talked about the bouncing ball and the level of elasticity. I think you will see, drop the ball and it'll bounce a number of times. And what we find is entrepreneurs keep bouncing. Even if they have failures, a number of people will demonstrate this. And Jared's one example, but a local example is a chap called Nick Calcutt, who has a business called Vital Facilities Solutions. And following a very tough divorce, he had several failures, which he would admit to previously. But following a very tough divorce and his business failure, Nick lost his home, lost financial stability, and worse still, lost contact with his sons. And in 2017, he then set up another business, Vital Facility Solutions, and despite further family setbacks, his father died, he had a renewed sense of purpose around this business, and he had real grit. And earlier this year, he was named as the most inspiring business person of the year at the National Entrepreneur Awards. But what's even lovelier is his sons now work with him, and he's also set up a business called The Growing Place, a charity for men's mental health. So our second analogy is around topspin and how a racket and the approach of the racket on the tennis ball and how you can create that topspin. So you can produce different results. And then the purpose of saying this around adversity is to create momentum. How do we create momentum? Using the friction of the stroke to achieve a lower trajectory of the tennis ball. It therefore wastes less energy going up and down. But when it does land, it actually increases in velocity, has that momentum, and it goes faster. And what that does is it means the rebound is stronger post-challenge, post-impact. And from an entrepreneur, how could we do that? How can we bounce forward? And actually, from a tennis angle, you put your competitor on the back foot, and in an entrepreneurial metaphor, we would put competitors on the back foot. So an example of this is a lady called Barbara Corcoran, who was the so-called queen of New York real estate. She split up with her partner and other personal circumstances, who detrimentally said she'd never succeed. And she reframed this rejection into motivation and grit. And with great passion and determination and optimism, she built a very successful enterprise. But she did see setbacks along the way. She previously had teaching experience, and so she knew that tuition for success was something she could learn from these failures, and she could pivot when she saw investments failing. And one of them, she pivoted a digital real estate marketing company. And she then grew it and successfully exited for 66 million. So she changed her angle of approach. She stayed focused, and she used the male domination of the property sector in New York as a purpose to succeed. The friction was there, and she's now a serial entrepreneur, investor, author, and TV personality. My third and final analogy is the ability for a ball to swing in the air. I'm sure there's probably much better cricketers than me in the room, but you'll quite often see cricketers polishing one side to make one side of the ball smoother, and then you're not meant to pick it or whatever, but the other one, leave it alone. And what you get from that is the ball will swing in the air. Now, there are lots of the trajectory of the ball will change. Now, a cricket swing bowler uses not only the ball, but the weather conditions and their own bowling action to outwit the batter. And that can be an off spin, it can be a leg spin, or one thing and another. But entrepreneurs, likewise, they must read the shifting market patterns. They must leverage their own strengths and weaknesses, their own bowling action, and pivot their trajectory, pivot their enterprises to outwit the competition. And one of my most respected entrepreneurs, and a perfect example of this, is Chrissy Rucker's husband, Nick Wheeler, the founder of Charles Tyrwhitt Shirts. Charles Tyrwhitt, by the way, are his middle two names. And he talks and he does a lot of interviews on resilience as a subject. Nick often refers to his very early failures, and he had several: photography, Christmas trees, shoes. But he actually talks about his original background. He went to school at Shrewsbury School, and he felt that child development encouraged independence of mind and a strong work ethic. He talks about persistence and never giving up on the importance of mindset and having self-confidence in your beliefs. And since Charles Tyrwhitt was founded, several other competitors have floundered. Now, I remember being in the bank. Nick was one of my customers, and I remember the bank telling me, look at Austin Reed, look at Pinks, look at all these brands. What chance has this got? And I said, you need to know how good this guy is. And I had total faith and belief. And nothing gives me greater pleasure than to see him going from strength to strength. Nick's ability to environmentally scan, to look at what's going on in the world, based on his experience, he was a Bain consultant actually, but it's enabled him to strategically plan and pivot and change and go with what's happening. And so he started off with an early direct mail model, literally catalog, direct mail in the post. And then he moved into e-commerce, direct to consumer e-commerce. And then he got into clicks and bricks. So he bought shops to display his products so people could go and see them and see the quality. I would tell you, by the way, there is not a single product he does not inspect and approve personally. And now he's taken it into international markets because obviously barriers are much easier now internationally across the clicks model. He has been able to strategically alter the focus and the trajectory of his business and has adapted better than many of his so-called bigger rivals. So taking this metaphor and the observations from entrepreneurs demonstrating resilience and incorporating them into the opera's components, we begin to see some highlighted areas where potential actions and improvements can be made. So I've simply taken the operas and I've said, how about these for some of the ideas you could be thinking about? These are things we could develop. So optimism, reflect. What has happened there? Can I turn that setback into lessons and move forward positively? Ideas at this stage, okay? We're going to develop this into potential actions. In terms of purpose, keeping that long-term perspective. Something happens, keep it in context, okay? Something's gone wrong. What's the bigger picture here? Keep it, and is it aligned with my values and my purpose for which I set this up? So I'm not going to go through every one, bearing in mind the time, because we're going to develop this further. The potential actions as a result of those ideas, and these are the busy slides, okay? So I'm just going to select a few of the points. But I want to highlight these actions on the back of what I said I would do is related to three things: mindset development, strategic adaptability, and strong support systems. So resilient entrepreneurs do demonstrate an optimism fueled by a positive self-talk, as you heard this morning from Lou, which can be developed by learning to reframe setbacks as learning opportunities. Gratitude lists can create more positivity, and simply reminding yourself that you've handled tough things before you can progress yourself to intentional can-do actions. One very experienced banker once told me to chase your passion, not your pension. And I've heard lots of entrepreneurs say that when we have a real why, and because of it, everything else flows. The customers, the revenues. So write down your why and test it. Being healthy, mentally and physically, is a lecture you heard earlier. And now is not the time to go into every detail of that, but breaking down tasks into bite-sized chunks and creating coping, thriving mechanisms. I've added that now. Thriving mechanisms when things don't always work out. Potential actions to build resilience around strategic adaptability can be strengthened by intentionally experimenting and trying new things, taking on creative projects and addressing small fears. Seeking and being open to feedback may provide insights and options you may not have considered yourself. In the so-called blue zones of the world where people live longer, I guess you could say have resilience, then friendships, community and belonging are all seen as significant factors. It is therefore no surprise that they have these strong support systems which enables this resilience factor. Building and diversifying your network is extremely powerful and can be achieved easily by joining industry trade bodies and associations, but also sharing and learning from peers can be extremely beneficial, like the club we heard of this morning. And taking on coaches and mentors can also support resilience development. So I'll reiterate that there are many ways to develop and strengthen your own resilience, but I hope there are some useful thoughts on those couple of slides for you to reflect on and hopefully take some actions. So in trying to bring together the various models, observations and learnings, I wondered if there was a simple way that I could summarize, I could give you a festive gift and a mnemonic. And because my brain thinks like this way, I chose resilience as the mnemonic. Because if you can remember that reality, the unexpected happens. You can't control all but the controllables. Stay optimistic. If you cope with the VUCA situations, embrace the changes and the opportunities flexibly. Be self-aware of your own strengths, limitations, and know your reactions, how you might react and what you might be able to control and do about it. Think incrementally. Learn via errors and don't just self-criticize. Learn ways to improve and get better and breathe. Have this perseverance, this inexorable drive to keep taking on setbacks as they come along and cope and thrive. Think of experiences taking on new projects and tasks. Develop your network. Keep the context. We've coped with a lot over the last few decades. We can keep doing it. And exercise. The importance of, as we heard this morning, of personal resilience, both physical and mental. So in closing, I'd like to share a couple of quotes from Machoma Dilwayo. Entrepreneurial success isn't about avoiding storms. It's sometimes about learning to sail in them. And while all seems to be against you, just remember sometimes a ship has to sail against the current, not with it. So I hope you've enjoyed and seen how the use of simple metaphors can help us to explore some quite challenging concepts and how mnemonics enable us to remember some key learnings. Your call to action that I would give you is to reflect on your own resilience, the metaphors, your own story and plans, and how can you take it to a new level? How can you adapt, learn through setbacks and see them as stepping stones? Thank you for the opportunity to share some observations. Thank you for the learning opportunity personally. I've been very happy to share some experiences with you. Thank you very much.
On time. Thank you.
I
Okay.
thought I was hoping I wouldn't.
No, you're all good.
Yeah.
We've got about 5-10 minutes for questions. Do we have any questions or comments? Mark?
No difficult cricket questions.
Oh, it's easy things. Yeah.
You've mentioned a lot of interesting things that we all know about, we've all heard of, but what about yourself, Martin? Have you got any personal experience stories you can share with us?
I actually started writing the presentation around my own personal examples. And then I thought, actually, some of these really famous entrepreneurs would be far more interesting than me. But I was this morning, so I was at an AGM, chairing an AGM yesterday, and I was listening to the entrepreneurs who we work with, and I've written down as a result some thoughts, because they presented their 7-year journey, and it's a hotel group called Bike and Boots. They are for outdoor people, Scarborough and the Peak District. They're for dog lovers, walkers, cyclists, people who enjoy the outdoors. So I drove up this morning, some crazy hour, through over beautiful, actually, the sunrise. And I was thinking, right, okay, this is their story from yesterday. 7 years. On December the 19th, we set up a new business. We bought the freehold of a business in Scarborough for 2.1 million, and we invested 2.9 million to refurbish it. We completely gutted the old Victorian hotel and sold off all the fixtures and fittings. And when we started to do the development, we found asbestos, even though the survey we hadn't said there wasn't any there. That's okay. Some of the shareholder base we'd created had experts, and one of them happened to be a civil engineer with asbestos expertise. So that was all part of the plan, very lucky. But we also found that we could make a 59-bed hotel for 65. But that gave us planning delays. The construction company wasn't very happy about it. We had the approval, but they started the construction and then COVID hit. Round one. They didn't want to work initially. That gave us delays. They then said if they were going to work, they wanted more money for the danger. And to be fair, they worked through and it was all done. So the cost increased, but then we opened, and as soon as it opened, COVID hit again. So we had to furlough our people. We had additional costs. We missed the summer trading period. I say we, but this is the Simons, the two Simons are the two entrepreneurs. And so, yes, the furloughed people, they'd only traded a few months. They had the same costs of running the place, and they raised money. COVID finishes. We had the staycation boom. The hotel in Scarborough turned over 2.2 million that year. Incredible, with a lower VAT figure. They then put that up again. Things slowed down a bit, but the second site in the Peak District started. This time we were leasing they were knocking a building down, building a brand new site, and the landlord was building it for us to lease. He started to build it, and of course, the Russian-Ukraine war started to happen. Material costs, construction materials rocketed. The developer wanted more money. got into financial difficulties and went bust. Well, you'd think, well, that's not our problem. But it delayed the opening. Energy costs went up. Food costs went up. Inflation. The second developer who was appointed did actually step in, but it delayed another 6 months. So we'd taken on the staff ready for a spring opening, and they weren't finished till autumn with all of the snagging and all of it. So we missed the summer cash flow. So further fundraising was required. The peaks were completed, and a year later, so I'm going back to 23-4 now, the turnover of the group was 4.4 million from nothing. 75 people employed. This year, or in the last financial year, the government decided to increase NI by 1%. They increased minimum wages, didn't really affect us because we were already paying more than the minimum wage. They brought in a new law about gratuities, which again, we were on the right side of, but still more work to do. We now got 2 trading entities, but we've got a consumer confidence squeeze. We've got the larger hotel groups under enormous pressure, rate pressure. So they are building more supply than the market actually demands. And we've got Airbnb, fast growing, and foreign trips, airplanes again. But apart from that, it's been an easy ride. But that's what the guys have had to cope with. And that is in 7 years. So that was a bit, hopefully you've seen that, that's a personal thing.
This sounds exciting.
Is that okay?
Yeah, great. Any other questions on that? All good, right? Well, we'll do another big round of applause.